Perhaps you'll remember that time when Mullah Nasruddin was walking down the road when he encountered a priest coming the other way, and they exchanged pleasantries and sat down under a tree. And after a while the priest said to the Mullah, "Mullah, you know, I'm so selfless that I never think of myself. I only think of others." And the Mullah replied, "Well, I'm so selfless. I am everyone else, so I can't think of myself." Remind you of a story. It's a story of that very, very rich and illustrious merchant who had 4 sons, but he also had one and only daughter who he adored and pampered. He fulfilled her every whim to such a degree that she became self-centered, vain, conceited and demanding. But even when her 4 brothers tried by teasing her to teach her some humility and feelings, she would run to her father and he would placate her, pamper her in some way. So people shunned her. She would often put on tantrums because she couldn't get what she wanted. But time passed, and she came to the age of 17 years old, and her father called her to him one day and said, "It's time for you to be married." Well, she stamped her feet. "I don't want to be married. I don't want to leave you. You take care of me so well." But her father was adamant about it, and so he put out an invitation to all abroad to invite all the eligible young men to his house, so that his daughter could choose one amongst them to be her husband. But all the eligible young men came and were feted by the merchant. They went hunting and they feasted and so forth. But the daughter, whose name was Shirin, she refused to have anything to do with them. I look at them and I don't see, they're just coming here to use my father, and I don't want any of them at all, she would say. Even though her mother tried to coerce her, she would stamp her feet and said, no, I'm happy here with my father. I don't want to get married." And after one such petulant performance, her mother left her to go off to attend to other business, and suddenly Shirin in her chamber found everything go dark around her. The whole room darkened. But in the darkness there appeared a most beautiful being, wearing emerald green silk dotted with emeralds. And when this being spoke, it was like the water running over a stream, gently. And the being said to her, Shirin, it is your destiny to be married. There is one who loves you, who will take care of you just as your father has. You cannot go against your destiny. And Shirin said, but I don't want to get married. And who? So the beautiful being led her over to the window, and down in the courtyard below there was a handsome being on a grey steed. And the being pointed to him and said, "This is the one who loves you and will take care of you." And then the being disappeared. Now Shirin did not mention anything about this meeting to anyone, but somehow her manner had softened somewhat. So when the festival fete was arranged, where all of the young men were to be gathered, and she was meant to choose amongst them, instead of being petulant and putting on a tantrum, she went along with what was happening. And after the fete, when all the women got together to discuss the qualities of the different men, Shirin asked them who was that one wearing the fur cap, and his name was given to her, Imran Khan. And so the next day, when her father called her to him and said, "Well, have you chosen?" She said, "Yes, I've chosen Imran Khan." Now her father was very pleased, because this was just the young man that he himself would have chosen. So the wedding arrangements were duly made, and Shirin and Imran Khan were married. After this, Imran Khan took Shirin back to his own place, and at first all around her pampered her, giving her what she wanted. But soon her petulance and her tantrums turned aside all those who were taking care of her and fulfilling her needs. It came to the stage where her husband chided her and said, "You are a married woman now. You must put aside your childish ways." But her behavior continued as before, so her husband's heart grew cold towards her, and he spent his time out hunting. And even when they were together, instead of being with her, he would polish his hunting knives or some such diversion. After a while, her husband spent less and less time with her. He grew sad. But then, one day when her husband was away, in her chamber, as she was playing with her long braided hair, the room grew dark once again, and again the beautiful emerald being appeared and said to Shirin, "Shirin, why are you not happy? Your husband has taken care of your every need." And again, somewhat petulantly, Shirin said, "But I don't love him. I can't love him." And with that, the beautiful emerald being came close to her and tapped her on her breast. And there was a ting, ting, ting. "Oh," said the beautiful being, "your heart is made of glass." Oh, Shirin was shocked. How can that be? How can I have a heart of glass? And the beautiful being said, "Sometimes when we look in the mirror too much, or we become vain and self-centered, our heart becomes glass. And others whose minds also can become glass. Not only their hearts and their emotions, excuse me. Shirin said, "What can I do? What can I do to change this?" And the beautiful being said, "This is not so easy, but I will tell you. First, you must discard all your jewelry, all your beautiful clothing. You must do what your servants do. You must fulfill your husband's every whim. And you must not speak for 3 full moons. And then perhaps something will change." So Shirin promised that she would do so. And she said to the beautiful being, what if it doesn't, what if my heart remains glass?" But the beautiful being in green just smiled enigmatically at her and suddenly disappeared, and the room grew light once again. Immediately, Shirin discarded all of her jewelry and her silks and satins and put on simple garb. From that time on, she did not speak, and even when others spoke to her, she acted as though she also did not hear. It was not hard with her husband. He hardly spoke to her now. She did as the servants did. And soon she found herself enjoying the simple tasks that there were for her to do. She began to hear the bird calls of the birds, notice the little insects as they flew, bringing pollen from flower to flower. She began to serve others in ways she'd never served before. But her mother-in-law, after her behavior, told her husband that a demon had taken over his wife. She could no longer speak or hear. Now, even though her husband Imran Khan's heart had grown somewhat cold towards her, he had great compassion for her. So he decided that he would go and seek a physician to help her, and he heard that there was such at a far distant place. So he prepared to make this long journey. He put his affairs in order to enable him to make this arduous trek to where that physician is, to perhaps convince him to come back to treat his wife. He took his grey steed and prepared accoutrements for his journey. His wife Shirin looked out of the window to see these preparations, and something happened within her. All of a sudden, there was a cracking sound, and even without a thought, she dashed out of her chamber, down the stairs and out in the courtyard where her husband was just about to get onto his horse when not only was there a cracking sound within her, but the sound of shattering. Tears flooded her cheeks, and she grabbed the stirrup of her husband's horse, and looking up at him with her tears flowing, she said, "Imran Khan, do not leave. I love you." Her husband jumped down from his horse, embraced his wife, lifted her up in his arms, and carried her back into their home. In the following days, the flowering of the love between them blossomed, so that in a short while they became truly husband and wife, living happily and harmoniously together. How many of those you meet are truncated, their hearts like glass, their minds like glass? How many times have you yourself said, "I will never"? And what happens when we do? How many do we meet who are truncated, facets of themselves become like glass? And ourselves, is there still somewhere in our being that is shut, closed, brittle? Is it the beautiful being in emerald green that comes to us? What is it that we have that has melted, shattered, disallowed us from maintaining, sustaining, guarding whatever aspect of ourself has become brittle, solid, hidden? What is it in you that represents this being in emerald green, healing color? What is it in you that gives you the ability to be able to see and feel. To be so selfless that you are everyone.
We've been there where other people are, so we can empathise and say, and not judge it, because that's where we came from.
So what's the relationship between selflessness and empathy? To be empathetic.
Well, if you're absorbed in yourself, you can't have empathy because you can't feel the other person.
That's right. So how can we relate to Moola Nasruddin's saying, I am so selfless that I am everyone else, so I can think of myself. What does it really mean?
There's no self. Selfless. It's gone.
What's there? What remains? What does it mean to be everyone else? Which puts paid to empathy, pity, compassion.
It's all one whole, so you don't see a separation between yourself and others.
Right. There's no separation.